What is it like to be a swordsmanship prodigy in a world dominated by magic? In this magic academy, where even dogs know a trick or two, the protagonist, Will, can't even perform basic magic. During a magic class, after teaching a spell, the teacher calls Will for a demonstration. He is supposed to control flames with a catalyst. Isn't this just setting him up for failure? Will can't even produce a tiny spark. The teacher is unsurprised, and the other students burst into laughter. Even the teacher mocks Will, calling him a model student only good at academics. The top students can't wait to show off, waving their wands to produce fierce flames. The teacher is displeased with such unauthorized actions. Cheyenne claims he was just trying to help Will, who seemed uncomfortable, but as a top student, the teacher lets it slide. In this world, magic is supreme. Magic is authority, and magical power is strength. This academy honors magical talent above all. For someone like Will, who only knows the theory but can't perform magic, this place is unsuitable. It's an implicit suggestion for Will to drop out voluntarily. Yet, Will has no rebuttal. After class, Cheyenne comes to provoke him with others, because Will can only earn credits by fighting low-level monsters in the dungeon. Cheyenne mocks him for this, which Coretto, one of the few who are kind to Will, witnesses. She knows how gentle and hard-working Will is, but kindness and effort alone can't make one a sorcerer, let alone reach the esteemed title of the Supreme Five Staffs. Cheyenne leaves with these words, taking his followers with him. Coretto comforts Will, telling him not to worry about what happened in class. Instead, Will reassures her, displaying his gentle nature, even seriously complimenting Coretto on her cuteness, which she can hardly resist. Will doesn't care about the mockery from teachers and classmates. He loves this world and admires the strongest magicians, the Supreme Five Staffs, who support the skies. Long ago, when the world faced threats from invaders from the sky, these 5 magicians emerged and drove the invaders away, sealing the sky and bringing peace. The title of Supreme Five Staffs continues to be the highest honor among magicians. Today, the Ice Princess staff might be watching them, and Coretto wonders if they are looking at them too. Will confidently assures her, as if he can see them himself. A memory from childhood suddenly came to Will's mind. He and a girl named Erufaria were discussing the sky. Erufaria said the real sky had the moon and the sun hanging in it, and a beautiful sunset on the other side. She believed that if they could reach the top of the tower closest to the sky, they might see such a sight. To enter that tower, one must become one of the Supreme Five Staffs. Back then, Will had no idea how unreachable this dream was. They made a pinky promise to watch the sunset together one day. Erufaria eventually became the youngest of the Supreme Five Staffs and successfully reached the top of the tower. However, Will still couldn't even perform basic magic. He then went to another teacher, Wakuna. Before Wakuna could get angry about his visit to the dungeon, Will knelt down and explained he was just trying to earn credits. The 2 demon guard bones he brought back were indeed worth 2 credits. The teacher asked if he still hadn't given up on his dream of becoming a Supreme Five Staff. But that dream was too difficult for Will. To reach the tower top, one must advance to the upper college and earn substantial credits in academics, practical skills, and internships. Will, unable to use magic, couldn't earn the needed practical skills credits. This crushed his hopes. The teacher, feeling a bit sorry for him, told Will that not only becoming a Supreme Five Staff, but even graduating was difficult for him. He needed to earn 4 credits that week. Will immediately started searching his notes for a monster worth 4 credits. The teacher said he hoped Will wouldn't go to the dungeon, but accidentally let slip that Baskerville was spotted on the 6th floor. Upon hearing this, Will excitedly thanked the teacher. Unbeknownst to them, Cheyenne had overheard their entire conversation. Seeing a chance to get rid of Will, whom he considered useless, Cheyenne set out for the 6th floor of the dungeon before Will. Cheyenne was not alone. He brought 2 minions with him. Worried about their ability to handle the 6th floor, the minions hesitated, which annoyed the proud Cheyenne. After they quickly corrected themselves, Cheyenne angrily proceeded to the 6th floor. Soon, they encountered a large monster. As soon as it appeared, it sent one of Will's minions flying with a punch. The remaining minion, terrified, screamed so loudly that Will heard it. Will, along with his pet Kiki, rushed towards the sound. His speed did not seem like that of a poor student. as he almost instantly arrived near the battlefield. Will did not immediately reveal himself, but hid and observed the battle. He saw Cheyenne sitting on the ground, continuously casting spells at the monster. Will recognized it as the evil spirit Sentinel, worth 10 credits. This type of monster should be on a lower level, so why was it on the 6th floor? Was there an accident with the floors? Cheyenne, who always claimed to be a top student, now looked terrified. His brain was too rigid to think of any strategy, only managing to cast fire spells passively. However, these fireballs couldn't even break the monster's defense. As the monster closed in on Cheyenne, Will prepared to rush out to save him, but then hesitated. Did he really need to save him? Remembering the times Cheyenne bullied and mocked him, Will felt indifferent about saving him. However, the next moment, he remembered the words Erifaria said to him before she left, describing him as not only gentle, but also braver than anyone else. Will decided that if he watched a classmate die in front of him, he wouldn't deserve to stand alongside Erifaria. With that thought, he put on the glasses Erifaria gave him, drew his sword, and charged forward, shielding Cheyenne just in time. Meanwhile, Teacher Edward arrived at Teacher Wakuna's office, displeased, saying that Cheyenne and the others had gone to the dungeon without permission, and asked Wakuna to send a familiar to look for them. Wakuna was about to release a small bird when he heard they were on the 6th floor and felt relieved, knowing Will was there too. He showed the situation on the 6th floor through a crystal ball. Will was fiercely fighting the monster with his sword. Despite having no magical ability, his speed and strength showed him to be an experienced and excellent fighter. Unable to injure Will, the monster tore up the ground, sending a barrage of stones flying at him. Will dodged and closed in on the monster, then suddenly accelerated and disappeared in a cloud of dust. Taking advantage, he jumped behind the monster and plunged his sword into its neck. Cheyenne watched in disbelief. Was this the same timid Will? Beside him, Kiki diligently acted as a camera, capturing the scene. Teacher Edward, just as incredulous, demanded an explanation from Wakuna. Wakuna explained that Will possessed a strength unusual for a mage, the resilience of a dwarf, and the insight to master an enemy's moves after a single glance. Even without magic, he was a unique warrior in this magical world. At that moment, Will had already cut off one of the monster's arms. He then raised his great sword and sliced through the monster's light cannon attack. His strike was even more powerful than thunder. With this slash, he also severed the monster's head, ending the battle. Will emerged from the smoke and extended his hand to Cheyenne, who, far from grateful, bit his lip in anger and frustration. Teacher Edward also struggled to accept this reality. How could someone who does not use magic surpass it? Afterward, Teacher Wakuna severely reprimanded Will, but also awarded him 10 credits. With these credits, Will no longer had to worry about not graduating. He continued to look up at the sky as he passed through the corridors, sharing a silent gaze with Erifaria, who watched him from above. What's it like to be the sole swordsman in a magical world? 5 years ago, Will had nothing. He, unable to use magic, was mocked. He entered the Magic Academy, only because the leaders wanted Erifaria to join. After Erifaria became one of the top 5 mages, Will became worthless. Until one day, Teacher Wakuna took him to the principal's office, where the principal gave him a short sword, and Will awakened his power as a swordsman, startling Wakuna beside him. The principal promised to recognize Will's enrollment, even though he couldn't use magic. Tearfully, Will asked if studying at the academy could lead him to the tower, and if becoming stronger could bring him to Erifaria. The principal didn't give a direct yes, but said he would have the chance, which was enough for Will. In today's magic class, Wakuna discussed the academy's promotion. There are mainly 2 ways to advance to the upper academy: create new magic, or earn over 7,200 credits. Achieving the former is rare, most advance by the latter. However, graduating is a challenge for everyone present. Thus, it was essentially a remedial class. Will was there too. Aside from magic, he excelled in all other subjects. Just then, Cheyenne's lackey boasted about him defeating a demon sentinel. Because they fainted early on and missed what happened, waking to find the sentinel defeated, they assumed Cheyenne did it. Cheyenne didn't explain, sitting silently. Seeing Will pass by, instead of thanking him, he angrily confronted him. Why would this incapable person, who can't even use magic, defeat the demon sentinel? Cheyenne was resentful but helpless. and left with his lackeys. Meanwhile, Teacher Edward went to the principal, hoping to have Will expelled, unable to accept someone who surpasses magic without using it. The principal comforted him with a smile, showing him Will's excellent grades in other subjects, suggesting he could become a magical engineer or pharmacist after graduation, as long as he doesn't aim to be one of the top 5 mages. But Will's goal is exactly that, leaving the principal speechless. He suggested letting Edward test Will with Will's future depending on the outcome. Edward gladly accepted and went to find Will. Here's the accurate and concise translation of your text. At this moment, Will and Coretto were together picking up their textbooks. Will can't use magic, and even opening a locker required Coretto's help. There was also a sword inside the locker, which is prohibited at school. Back in the dorm, Will's roommate wouldn't let him leave. Then, the two went to the study room where Will started reviewing his theory classes again, covering the same material from a new perspective to ensure he scores full marks in all subjects except magic. After all, missing even 1 credit could prevent his advancement to the upper academy. Suddenly, Coretto noticed a white hair on his head and shyly asked Will if he should pull it out, but Will declined. While they were laughing, Teacher Edward came to fetch Will for what he claimed was one-on-one tutoring at the practice field. Upon arrival, Edward immediately attacked, his magic materializing like a winding snake beside Will. Will realized Edward's hostile intentions. Indeed, Edward stated the purpose of the exercise. Will had to hit him once to earn 5 credits in practical magic. Failure meant expulsion. After saying this, Edward swung his wand as a huge magic circle appeared under Will's feet. Meanwhile, the principal had called Teacher Wakuna to watch the live stream with him, to see if Will truly deserved to aim for the top 5 mages. Wakuna felt anxious, especially since it was Edward, a man close to reaching the top 5, challenging Will. It was no wonder Edward was upset. Despite reaching the tower's top, he wasn't chosen. However, he didn't use lethal force against Will, only casting a low-level dark magic spell that was surprisingly powerful. Fire chased Will, who was fast enough to dodge and even counterattack, though Edward's defenses were tight. Will felt pain when his kick hit a barrier. As Edward grew more frustrated, he knocked Will back with a gesture, and a large magic circle appeared behind him, knocking Will to the ground. Will's glasses shattered, and his spirit sank. Edward's moves were too fast to parry without chanting, and his attacks and defenses were flawless. Here's the translation of your text into concise and clear English. Will was almost in despair as Edward continued to play with his mind, stating he had only used 2 types of magic, one to burn him with black flames, and the other to block his unsightly acts with a barrier. Edward then demonstrated the ability to multiply a single spell, creating multiple magic circles behind him. Will fired simultaneously while scrambling on the ground to dodge, as Edward waved his wand like a conductor. Will was no match for such a high-level magic instructor and wished he had a sword. After Will was summoned away, Coretto went alone to the locker and couldn't help worrying about Will. What if Teacher Edward whipped or interrogated him? But then, wouldn't that be even better? Suddenly, Will's pet, Kiki, limped over, scratching at the locker door with tearful eyes. Coretto realized something must have happened to Will and quickly opened the locker. Meanwhile, Edward approached the immobilized Will on the ground, passionately taunting him. Even I can't surpass the top 5 mages, so how can you? Magic is the truth of this world. Once, a dwarf tribe sparked a rebellion with 10,000 soldiers, but a single magician with a wand defeated them all. A sword can never match a wand. Edward stepped on Will's head, but Will refused to give up, determined to reach the top 5 mages. As he struggled to his feet, Edward curiously wondered what drove his belief. To his surprise, it was Will's desire to be with the one he loved. Edward almost lost his composure, mocking, "So, your goal for reaching the pinnacle of magic is a shallow romance?" Ignoring the taunt, Will remained determined to watch the sunset with Erufaria. Suddenly, he heard Coretto's voice and caught the sword thrown to him. Awakening, Will put on the glasses Erufaria had given him. The real battle was just beginning. Edward, unimpressed, continued to release black flames, but Will cut through his magic with the sword. Edward fired 1,000 flames, which Will dodged by leaping and stepping on floating debris, slicing through the black flames and closing in on Edward. Recalling the fierce battle of the dwarf tribe, where a brave dwarf warrior lost all but still made a significant strike, Will acknowledged that swords could match wands. Approaching Edward from above, Will was quicker, breaking his barrier with a sword strike before Edward could react and slashing at him. Edward's wand reached his face, but before the magic could activate, Will's sword had already cut Edward's cheek. Will won the battle, and Edward awarded him 5 academic credits. The principal and Wakuna watched the entire live stream and praised Will's indomitable spirit during the battle, affirming his worthiness. When Aerofaria became one of the Supreme 5 staffs, she tearfully said goodbye to Will, gifted him her glasses, and left without looking back. Will, filled with reluctance, promised Aerofaria's departing figure that he too would reach the tower to watch the sunset with her. After she left, Will sobbed with shoulders shaking, then turned to teacher Wakuna and declared it would be his last time crying so embarrassingly. Will, true to his word, still has no mastery over magic, but trains daily. He also delivers newspapers to earn money, quickly recovering any papers that fly away due to his speed and even managing to help Kiki on his head. To his surprise, today's paper featured Aerofaria, announcing her creation of a new magic spell, bringing her total to 12. Inspired by Aerofaria's efforts, Will resolved to work even harder, especially after reading about a decree issued by the Senate, authored by Aerofaria herself. Will rushed back to his dorm, asking his roommate Rosti for magical tools since the decree involved collecting ice cores from Frost Infantry. Students contributing would receive a reward. Planning to head directly to the 4th layer, Will relied on Rosti's tools. His roommate, impressed, readily handed over a newly made tool and stuffed some bread for the journey, cautioning him to be careful. Arriving at the 4th layer of the underground maze, Will found many students there, all motivated by Aerofaria's decree. Eager to begin, the ground suddenly shook. Xion had used a powerful spell to dispatch a group of Frost Infantry. While his lackeys praised him, Xion felt it was not enough, believing he still couldn't match Will, unaware that Will was also admiring his strength. With no interest in greetings and the infantry quickly being defeated by others, Will ventured deeper. Unexpectedly, he saw a group of monsters attacking a girl. Will immediately intervened, swiftly defeating 3 beasts. The stunned girl quickly apologized and introduced herself as Alice, a 4th-year student. Meanwhile, Coretto and others were attending a theory class with teacher Wakuna, who explained the significance of creating new magic spells. Such innovations could lead to unconditional advancement to the tower, allowing creators to name them. While creators might fade away, the spells named after them would live on forever, immortalizing their names in history. Creating new magic is certainly not an easy task. Aerofaria alone has invented 12 types of magic, a feat unmatched by anyone before or since. In the long history, Aerofaria is undoubtedly the greatest mage. Coretto and her friends discussed Aerofaria's decree and learned that Will was battling Frost Infantry in the dungeon. A close friend bluntly pointed out that Coretto might be jealous of Lady Aerofaria, feeling that Will was taken away by a powerful childhood friend. This led to a quarrel in class, and teacher Wakuna sternly reprimanded them. However, Coretto was indeed very concerned about Will and Aerofaria's relationship. Meanwhile, Will simply teamed up with the younger student he had saved. Surprisingly, this junior was only 14 years old. She was very kind, which made Will wonder why she wouldn't discriminate against him, given his lack of magical ability. When Alice heard this, she found it even stranger. How could she scorn someone who helped her? After all, she respects anyone with skills, even if they're not magical. This is what normal people think. Alice was also motivated by Aerofaria's decree, wanting to help the Supreme 5 staffs and aiming to become a supporter of the sky. Most people in this world have never seen the real sky. What they see is a barrier created by the Supreme 5 staffs with powerful magic. If this barrier breaks, darkness will envelop the world again, and calamity will strike. Hence, the students are so enthusiastic not only to assist the Supreme 5 staffs, but also to contribute to supporting the sky. Alice mentioned that she had once met Aerofaria. During a crisis in the dungeon, surrounded by monsters, Aerofaria appeared suddenly, froze them all, and gently reminded her to be more careful next time. Since then, Alice became a die-hard fan of Aerofaria. She came to the dungeon for Aerofaria but found no Frost Infantry, likely because they had already been defeated by others. Even searching magic was useless. While Alice was talking non-stop, Will crouched down to examine the ground because such creatures leave ice shards in their tracks. However, the ice shards here were several times larger than normal, suggesting a larger creature ahead. Without any fear, Will walked forward, putting on his glasses. As expected, a giant beast fell from the sky the next second. Will quickly pulled Alice away as the beast landed, creating a spectacular impact. The countless eyes on its massive head were truly sanity-draining. It was indeed the Frost King, a higher class of the Frost Infantry, worth 6 academic credits, and a unique species on the 4th level. Just as Alice finished speaking, the beast suddenly shot out a shockwave. Fortunately, Will dodged quickly. The shockwave hit the ground, creating a pattern of ice flowers. Will moved Alice to a safe spot, telling her to stay there while he handled things alone. Alice, however, didn't want Will to face the Frost King by himself, as it was immune to physical attacks and could freeze anyone on contact. It was known as a bane to melee fighters like dwarves, only vulnerable to long-distance magical attacks. Despite this, Will remained calm, reassuring Alice not to worry since he had defeated the creature numerous times before. Will skated across the ice, launching himself forward and swiftly avoiding the Frost King's breath. Unexpectedly, the creature's shockwave was persistent, changing direction and chasing Will like a missile. Will, descending from above, rapidly approached the beast, wielding a magical artifact he had obtained from a roommate. The Frost King, enraged, began firing indiscriminately. Alice quickly took Kiki aside, watching as Will's movements blurred. Close to the Frost King, he finally threw the magical artifact, a hook, which latched onto the beast's body. Holding the other end, Will slid under it and secured the Frost King tightly. Since it was a creature of frost, vulnerable to fire and explosions, Will fully restrained it, then ignited a fire device connected by steel wire on his glove by twisting his hands together. The flame traveled along the wire directly to the Frost King and detonated, reducing the beast to ashes and leaving only materials behind. Alice's expression changed instantly upon witnessing this. The once-thought incompetent Will was far from the rumors she had heard. Contemplating how to repay him, she heard Will calling her name, smiling and indicating they could return, as the Frost King had left them with plenty of materials. Alice's smile quickly returned. Upon their return, Alice headed straight to the Mage's Tower, removing her disguise on the way and entering a grand hall. Seated there were the Supreme 5 staffs, though the central seat was vacant. Erefaria was among them. Alice reported her discovery at the academy, mentioning Will, an interesting talent who couldn't use magic. She suggested making him a member of the tower. 2 members immediately rejected the idea, but one burly, white-haired man found it intriguing. As internal strife seemed imminent among the Supreme 5 staffs, a red-haired member intervened, suggesting they observe Will during the upcoming Grand Magic Festival, as capable individuals would prove themselves. After the discussion, 3 of the staffs left, leaving only Erefaria and Alice. Erefaria looked forward to seeing Will again with anticipation. To become one of the top 5 staff members, a student needs a score of 7,200. It's Will's turn for the exam, where he must fight a huge golem. Unable to use magic or a sword, Will fails again. In contrast, 2 other students destroy the golem easily, with a single move each. Liana with a score of 10,000 and Lindell, who has a similar score. Then comes Julius, who uses ice magic to freeze not only his golem, but others as well. Only these 3 have scores above 10,000, making them sure candidates for advancement to the upper academy, while Will struggles even to graduate with just half their scores. Dejected, Will blocks Julius's path, who frowns upon those weak in magic. Will stands up to clear the way without arguing. As the magical festival approaches, everyone in the academy is excitedly discussing it. This festival, held every 2 years, includes competitions and the chance for top mages to scout talent. Despite not meeting the 7,200 score threshold, it's an opportunity for students to be noticed by the tower factions led by the top 5 staffs: the Thunder, Demon, Flame, Ice, and the 4th being the Light King. Performing impressively could attract any faction's attention. Meanwhile, talent scouts from the Magic Tower will also be present. Despite this, Will doubts his chances. As he and Corretto talk, Alice walks by unnoticed. Will, known for turning a previous festival into a chaotic event, has no plans to compete again. As the festival nears, students practice their magic more fervently. Coretto helps Will open a locker, sensing a barrier nearby. They send Kiki to remove it, revealing a hidden door leading to students gambling, including Cheyenne and his cronies. Cheyenne is displeased to see Will but doesn't confront him with Coretto there. Will asked why he was here. Before Cheyenne could respond, his lackey eagerly explained that they weren't concerned about the betting odds. Cheyenne wasn't jealous of the top 3, including Lindell. Frustrated, Cheyenne slapped each of his followers, asserting he hadn't lost to them. He claimed his lower scores were only due to failing the academic tests, insisting he was more skilled in magic. Will seriously watched Cheyenne boast, which only aggravated him more. After class, Coretto bravely suggested he could accompany Will to the dungeon, but Will had to work at a tavern that night. Located in a civilian area, its customers were mostly overworked dwarven miners. Will was well acquainted with them. The miners, aware of the upcoming magical festival, encouraged Will to participate, which he quickly declined. Right after, the boss reminded him not to slack off and to learn from his roommate Rosti, who worked efficiently and enthusiastically. Though Rosti was liked, the miners preferred Will, calling him their dwarven brother. The tavern was filled with a jovial atmosphere. While washing dishes, Rosti questioned why Will, with his connection to teacher Wakuna, didn't pursue a better-paying job. Will didn't want to bother his teacher and enjoyed the company of the hardy dwarves. Unexpectedly, Julius and his lackeys entered the tavern because other places were full. Julius, who looked down on Will and the dwarves, quickly angered everyone with a few words and mocked the homeless state of the dwarves, whose world had been destroyed by invaders from above, forcing them to flee to this world where they have been bullied and not allowed to retaliate against the noble mages. Only able to glare in response, the dwarves watched as the group mocked the tavern's food. Julius's comments grew more offensive until Will stepped out and demanded he retract the insults about the dwarves and their hard-grown beans. Enjoying Will's irritation, Julius kicked a plate, which hit Will. When his lackeys tried to attack, Will pinned them down. The spilled beer splashed on Julius. Will declared his actions, more irrational and animal-like than the dwarves, were the most humiliating he had ever endured. Enraged, Julius froze the entire tavern. Will, pulling out his wand, leaped from a magical formation as icicles chased him, knocking off his glasses and trapping him against a wall. Julius pointed his wand at Will's chest, creating an ice flower penetrated by the wand, stabbing at Will's chest. Rosti gripped his wand, ready to intervene, but Julius suddenly decided freezing Will here wasn't enough to appease his anger. He ordered Will to participate in the magical festival, intending to humiliate him publicly. Will shattered the ice column with his body, seized Julius's wand, and agreed to compete, but demanded that if he won, Julius must apologize to the dwarves. The highly anticipated Magic Festival has finally arrived, starting with the Sky Race, akin to Quidditch in Harry Potter. Liana, one of the top students at the Academy, took the lead and set a new record by winning the Sky competition for the second consecutive time. After watching this event, Alice left immediately as she had work to do and wanted to cheer on a senior student. Once she put on her glasses, her voice noticeably changed. Cheyenne unexpectedly teamed up with Will. It seems even a tsundere cannot resist a beauty trick, requested personally by Coretto. Coretto had hoped for a private world with the beauty, but to his surprise, Will was there too. The condition for entering the final championship was that each team's total credits had to exceed 21,000. Coretto had to ask Cheyenne for help to allow Will to participate, given that Cheyenne nearly had 10,000 credits himself. Cheyenne was almost furious, yet Will didn't even look his way, instead making eye contact with Julius behind him. This further shattered Cheyenne's defenses. Despite feeling deeply humiliated by Will and now being ignored, Cheyenne reluctantly joined the team. The afternoon session of the Magic Festival was about to start, with the commentator surprisingly being Professor Edward. The host provocatively claimed that Edward was the most disliked teacher, imagining how many times he might have been hit with a wand in students' fantasies. Edward exuded a sinister aura, warning the host to prepare a coffin for the next class. The host quickly apologized and announced the start of the championship battle. The championship was divided into 5 battlefields: volcanic, swamp, rocky desert, grassland, and forest, and it was the only event featuring teams of 3. Contestants started at the outer edge of each arena and had to make their way to the central arena, with the first team to seize the crown declared the winner. In addition to the harsh natural environments, The 5 battlefields were equipped with numerous traps crafted by the teachers. During the journey to the arena, contestants could either take the shortest route through obstacles or hinder other teams, making it a true battle royale that tested the students' ability to adapt to unexpected situations. The host excitedly informed everyone that in unofficial private bets, Team 12 led by Lindell and Team 9 led by Julius were tied for most popular. He had bet all his wealth on Lindell. Besides these 2 teams, Team 6, featuring Will, also deserved attention. Despite having the strong substitute player Cheyenne, their popularity was the lowest because of Will's presence. Laughter erupted in the stands when Will appeared on the crystal ball, with the audience mocking him. However, the race officially began soon after. Teacher Wakuna specifically stopped Will at the entrance, having previously advised him against participating in the Magic Festival. Yet Will, showing a resolute expression, declared that even if ridiculed, he wanted to win the race. As the start signal for the race sounded, all contestants rushed out, first encountering the forest of golems. Surprisingly, Will took the lead. Skeptics in the audience scoffed, doubting his ability to defeat the golems, but they were quickly proven wrong when Corretto magically crafted a gauntlet for Will, who knocked down several golems with a single punch, sending a shockwave through the air. One of the mocking spectators was doused with a drink, proving that even without magic, Will's combat skills were impressive enough to astonish everyone. Thus, Will's team was the first to break through the forest of golems, with the most skilled Cheyenne unable to demonstrate his strength and seemingly just tagging along behind Will, which made Cheyenne even more withdrawn, questioning the significance of all his efforts so far. Team 6 swiftly entered the rocky desert area, where they were met with numerous giant stone cannons. Will and Corretto coordinated once again. Will shattered the ground with a punch, while Corretto used the airborne debris to form a wall that blocked the cannonballs. He then created countless swords for Will, who threw each one with precision, destroying a cannon with every strike. After demolishing the final cannon, Team 6 easily passed through the rocky desert, leaving other teams far behind. Cheyenne continued to coast along. Spectators outside began to sense something was amiss, wondering how the supposed weakling could be so formidable. Edward clarified their doubts, explaining that Will's skills were those of a person dedicated to conquering dungeons, utilizing knowledge and experience to eliminate unnecessary actions, thus enabling precise and rapid breakthroughs. At this time, Alice was the most excited, cheering on Will loudly. The other teams, not wanting to be outdone, unfortunately lacked Will's strength, and many students fell into traps. At this rate, Team 6 might be the first to reach the central arena. Unaware of this, Julius's team was clueless until they sent someone to investigate and discovered they were trailing Will's team. However, Julius remained arrogantly confident, saying it was not a problem as he turned the ground he walked on into ice. Meanwhile, Will and his team had reached the final battlefield, the forest of magical trees. Upon entering, numerous chains appeared, clearly the work of Teacher Edward. Unexpectedly, Will picked up his sword and skated around the perimeter of a magic circle, digging it out to face another circle, causing them to neutralize each other. Thus, they also passed this level with ease. Unable to resist, the host asked Teacher Edward for his thoughts, to which Edward simply clicked his tongue in annoyance. Will knew that approaching the arena would increase the likelihood of encountering enemies. Each team was likely to engage in combat in this forest, so they planned to maintain their lead and set an ambush, taking advantage of the terrain to confront Julius. However, the next moment, an ice spear pierced through his cloak. Julius had already moved ahead of them, alone, with a proud smile, launching countless ice spears with his wand. Will dodged continuously, not expecting their final showdown to start here. Both men had ignored Cheyenne, infuriating him. He had reluctantly coasted along, and now he felt invisible. His anger materialized as he chanted a spell and unleashed a massive fire attack, aimed at Julius. Corretto sensed danger and urged Will to escape, quickly erecting an earth barrier. The mighty flames surged towards Will instead. Cheyenne struck his teammate at a critical moment, causing a backlash that shook the entire venue. Will was confused. What's going on? Why am I being attacked by my own teammate? Cheyenne had targeted both Will and Julius, and now he demanded a duel with Will, attacking immediately. Will dodged swiftly. Corretto tried to help, but was blocked by an ice wall created by Julius, who was unscathed from the earlier bombardment and now aimed at the interfering Corretto. Will heard Coretto scream but had to parry Cheyon's attacks first. His sword was knocked away. Cheyon looked down at him from above. "Pick up your sword, you slacker." With his opponent pushing him too far, Will had no choice but to fight back to the end. Will took off his glasses, looking confused. "What's going on? Why did my teammate attack me?" The forest had turned into a sea of fire. Cheyon demanded a duel with Will and fired a shot without explanation. Coretto was isolated outside by an ice wall raised by Julius. A big brawl started on the spot. Will had no choice but to focus on the enemy in front of him, pulling out his sword to accept Cheyon's challenge. Initially, Cheyon felt pity for Will when he was bullied by others, with a note on his back saying, "I am a worthless incompetent." Unable to stand it, Cheyon burned the note and asked Will to be his follower to at least keep him from being bullied. However, Will ignored him. Cheyon turned him around, and Will, without a hint of sparkle in his eyes, told him to get out of the way, then picked up his things and left quietly. Cheyon was annoyed because that guy didn't regard anyone highly, which made him start disliking Will. Now, he finally had a chance for revenge. With a wave of his wand, a fire dragon rushed straight at Will. Will jumped aside but was caught by the leg and flung away by the fire dragon. Fortunately, he managed to cut it off with his sword, but the flames exploded. Will had to retreat to avoid them. The more Will dodged, the angrier Cheyon got, questioning why he wouldn't fight back. At such a time, Will still cared that they were teammates, and his main enemy was Julius, not Cheyon. Hearing this, Cheyon got even angrier. Meanwhile, the audience was in an uproar. Team 6, which had been leading, started infighting. The host asked Professor Edward for his opinion. Edward was just enjoying the show, saying that regardless of the reasons, infighting should never happen. "Looks like the talent scouts sent by the tower will have to deduct significant points for this." "Oh, what a pity," Edward said, his face alight with excitement. The talent scouts indeed thought so. Although Cheyon ranked 4th in his grade, the infighting certainly lowered his evaluation. In the audience, Alice took a seat next to Rosti and loudly cheered for Will, telling Rosti that Will had been introduced to her by someone. Initially, she didn't pay much attention, but now she was completely captivated by him, her words seemingly provocative. Rosti couldn't help but remark, "Will is really popular, but he's my favorite too." Meanwhile, Julius temporarily gave up on Will and pursued Coretto, who dodged while trying to counterattack. Unexpectedly, Coretto stepped on a trap and was immediately teleported away. At the same time, Julius's figures appeared simultaneously around the arena, including one near Lindell. Julius had not only challenged Will, but Lindell as well. Just after speaking, a green magical circle appeared under his feet along with a tornado. The next second, the Julius body shattered into ice. It was just a clone. Lindell picked up the ice shards, surprised that Julius had this trick up his sleeve, recognizing the secret technique related to the Supreme Staffs. The audience outside the arena was confused, but understood that Lindell defeated Julius with one move. The host's eyes gleamed with gold since he had bet all his money on Lindell's team. Meanwhile, the deputies of 2 other factions were discussing, now certain that the winner would be either Lindell or Julius, with Team 6 caught in infighting, having no chance. Cheyon's 2 followers were somewhat sad, but understood. However, Will didn't understand why Cheyon hated him so much. He hadn't done anything, yet Cheyon always seemed to pick on him. Initially, Cheyon inexplicably asked him to be a follower. Will's mind was occupied with, "I don't have time," because he needed to find Erufaria quickly, so he told Cheyon to let go, never expecting Cheyon to hold a grudge for so long. As Cheyon grew angrier, he chanted a spell to summon his guardian fire eagle, which flew directly at Will. Will quickly planted his sword into the ground for support and split the fire eagle, charging at Cheyon. Unexpectedly, the fire eagle almost instantly regenerated. It seemed essential to strike a critical blow. As 2 flames attacked simultaneously, Will dodged the fire eagle's strike and confronted Cheyon's flame directly. Thanks to his specially made gloves, he finally neutralized Cheyon's attack. Edward, watching from outside the arena, couldn't help but exclaim in amazement, "This is beyond the level of a student." However, his admiration was for Cheyon, who naturally caught the attention of the Flame faction. They had only heard of this student, who was skilled but not in the top 3. It seemed he had broken through his limits during the competition. Now, Cheyon's strength matched those top 3 students. The talent scouts were eager to report back to their leader. As Cheyon's opponent, Will felt this most acutely. This Cheyon seemed like a completely different person from the one he knew, and even Will found him hard to handle. Cheyon, increasingly aggressive, loudly challenged Will. "Wasn't there more to you when you defeated the evil spirit sentinel? Will insisted. "We are teammates. I have no reason to fight you." The more Will said this, the more Cheyenne felt offended. "After being treated like a fool and suffering so miserably, you still say you don't resent me?" How could Will not feel resentment, having imagined revenge many times? But his urgent task was to defeat Julius. This statement hit a raw nerve for Cheyenne. He had always found Will annoying, incompetent, and infuriating for his refusal to give up. But why was Will always focused on something else? Cheyenne shouted, "Don't ignore me!" Will's feelings were complex. He had never asked for Cheyenne's recognition, but deep down, he always hoped to be acknowledged. So, if Cheyenne were willing to recognize him, then he would have to meet him with all his strength. Finally focusing entirely on himself, Cheyenne felt a surge of excitement and quickly chanted a spell, summoning his guardian fire eagle again, preventing Will from approaching recklessly. Thus, Will decided to time his counterattack with the launch of the magic. With a grand gesture, Cheyenne directed the fire eagle, which brought a multitude of annihilation magic formations and a barrage of fireballs. However, Will had already anticipated their trajectory and teleported directly in front of the fire eagle, severing its core with a single strike. Just as he was about to continue his attack on Cheyenne, Corretto suddenly erected a wall between them and shouted, "Stop fighting!" Both turned to see Corretto, disheveled, claiming she had defeated Julius, though he had vanished suddenly. Only then did Cheyenne notice Corretto's tattered clothes and quickly covered his eyes, though not completely. Corretto urged Will to hurry on, as he still had to settle the score with Julius. Cheyenne, unwilling to be interrupted, was about to complain when Corretto stepped in, hands on hips, scolding. Thoughtfully, Will draped his jacket over her, remarking that girls should be careful. Smiling, he thanked Corretto, noticing her bashful expression. Now Cheyenne was not only a clown, but also a loser. Meanwhile, Julius's team had already entered the arena first and was the only team present, victory within reach. But the next moment, Will landed in the arena like a thunderbolt, declaring, "Let's settle this, Julius." Erufaria always looked up at Will in the sky, either sleeping or watching under the tower. Dubbed by her assistant as the highest of the 5 rods in a saint's disguise, she was introduced to a recommended candidate by a talent scout. The top pick was Julius, whom the Ice faction hoped would become Erufaria's successor. After reviewing the information, Erufaria acknowledged his abilities. Meanwhile, Will arrived at the central venue, confronting Julius. Seeing Will, Julius felt relieved, knowing that without shaming him, victory would be easy, something he was not content with. Will put on his glasses, and Julius waved his wand, turning the crushed ice into a foggy assault. Will, blinded by the fog, sensed the magic moving rapidly. He wondered if a 3-person ambush was planned. Suddenly, an attack came from behind, but Will dodged just in time. With the enemy hidden, Will could only dodge by running and searching for their location. After avoiding 3 attacks, he leaped towards Julius below. However, before reaching him, he was hit by a 4th attack. As the fog cleared, Julius and his 2 companions stood still, never having moved. All attackers were Julius's duplicates, totaling 5, including himself. Recognizing the magic, 1 duplicate exploded in front of Will, freezing him. Simultaneously, Edward and Wakana identified the magic used by Julius as Erufaria's secret technique, the 12 Ice Mysteries. Known for creating 12 types of magic, Julius employed the first, which creates duplicates made of ice. Will broke down, questioning why Julius used Erufaria's magic. Julius, smirking mockingly, claimed it was due to his talent, having self-taught this complex magic to a high level, even boasting that the title Ice Princess's Rod was no big deal. Insulted, Will burst from the ice, shouting Julius's name in anger. Julius responded by launching a huge ice spike, which Will slashed apart. Yet, other duplicates attacked similarly. Under Julius's command, 3 duplicates built an ice prison, trapping Will inside a pyramid-shaped cage that resisted all his strikes. Julius then summoned a giant ice flower, crushing the cage completely. The battle seemed over, with even Professor Edward praising the victory achieved without a step, an ideal and fundamental skill for a mage. Julius then began to demonstrate his skills to the talent scouts, directly nominating himself as Lord Erufaria's successor. Cheers erupted from the audience, and everyone thought Julius was sure to win. Only Alice realized it was all a show. Julius was using Will just to promote himself. However, Rosti commented that if Julius still hadn't won after such a display, It would be quite embarrassing. Just then, a huge crack appeared in the ice, followed by melting snow. Will stepped out, thanking Julius for his magic, which had calmed him down, as anything related to Erufaria usually excited him. This threw Julius off balance. Julius ordered his duplicates to attack together, but Will dodged all the ice missiles like they were nothing. He then teleported behind two sidekicks and knocked them down with a single strike. Now, only Julius and his duplicates were left. Edward watched clearly as Will first hit among simultaneous shots, disappearing from Julius's view, then attacked from above, just like in their previous battle. Soon, all Julius's duplicates shattered. Will had realized that the duplicates did not move on their own. They were controlled by Julius's allies. Thus, he openly stated that Julius could not compare to Erufaria, breaking Julius's defenses with just one sentence. Meanwhile, atop the tower, Erufaria acknowledged that Julius might become her successor. But what she wanted was not a successor, but a sword by her side. In public, Will exposed Julius's secret technique, claiming that Julius could not use it effortlessly. A shaken Julius threw out an ice flower, which Will slashed apart, causing it to explode. Then, several more duplicates appeared, and countless ice pillars smashed down towards Will. Even if unable to move simultaneously, Julius could win by the sheer number of attacks. Will could not tell which was Julius's real body, as the duplicates looked just like him. The next second, Will charged at him. Julius quickly erected an ice wall, but Will split it with one sword strike, knocking him back. Julius did not understand how Will could tell them apart. Will explained that the internal temperature of the technique was opposite to the practitioner's average body temperature, around -37 degrees. Using magic lowered the body temperature even more. If not controlled perfectly, frost would show at the feet. Julius then noticed ice shards at the feet of his duplicates, increasingly breaking his defenses. Why did Will, whom he saw as incompetent, understand this magic better than him? Naturally, because Will and Erufaria were childhood friends, and he had always admired and studied her magic, even though he could never match her. After saying that, Will couldn't help but look up at the sky to meet Erufaria's distant gaze. He knew the strengths and weaknesses of Erufaria's magic. With Julius's morale shattered, he could no longer perform potent magic. Ironically, Will told him that this secret technique was a magic created by Erufaria when she was just 2 years old. Julius had just proudly claimed that the Ice Queen's staff was nothing special, and now he was embarrassingly contradicted. However, this provocation unexpectedly triggered Julius to awaken. He summoned 8 duplicates, planning to overwhelm Will with numbers. Will continued to provoke him, saying, "I used to be bullied by 10 Erufarias." He shattered each ice pillar and then the duplicates, which under Will's sword were no match at all. Will's agility made the long-range attacking duplicates ineffective, and he quickly destroyed all of them. In the end, only the real Julius remained. This time, Will dropped his sword and punched Julius in the face, sending him flying and swelling his proud face into a puffy mess. Cheers erupted from the audience as the underdog Will defeated the elite Julius, who had over 10,000 academic points. Teacher Wakuna breathed a sigh of relief, and Coretto immediately ran up as no one could stop Will now. He was destined to be the champion. Just as the host finished saying this, Lindell suddenly appeared on stage, placing the crown on his own head. "Oops. Sorry for interrupting your duel, but I've already won," he said, causing even more excitement for the host, who had bet everything on Lindell. Although surprised, Will quickly accepted this outcome. For him, defeating Julius was the real victory. Watching the shiny stars falling from the sky, Will knew Erufaria was also watching him, and he had kept his promise. After Will defeated Julius at the Magic Festival, a celebration was held at the tavern where he works. All the dwarf brothers came, along with Coretto, Rosti, and Professor Wakuna. So, where was Julius, who owed the dwarfs an apology? Right, he was busy washing dishes in the kitchen. Coretto was defending Will, upset that despite his excellent performance in the competition, he was still overlooked by the tower. It was all Cheyenne's fault. Julius and his followers were even more devastated. They had to work in the dwarf's tavern because Will had embarrassed him so much that no headhunters were seeking him out. However, life at the academy might not be easy for Will going forward. In the blink of an eye, it was nearly time for the comprehensive internship. The 6th-year students had to explore the dungeon for a week. Everyone was discussing forming teams. Unexpectedly, many students approached Will because, at the last Magic Festival, He had single-handedly defeated Julius, who was among the top 3 in credits. Though they still called him a laggard, their enthusiasm surprised Will. When Liana and the other 2 top students passed by, they did not join in. Instead, Coretto burst in, loudly scolding them for their previous disdain for Will, calling them selfish. They saw that Will was upset. However, Will was actually thrilled, thinking everyone wanted to befriend him. Then, a girl grabbed Will's hand, countering that it was Coretto who had always monopolized Will. She then invited Will to join them in the dungeon, which upset Coretto so much that she brushed them off, declaring that she had plans with Will the next day to go shopping together, even though that wasn't true. But Will did not contradict Coretto publicly. Back at the dorm, Coretto was excited about what she considered her first date with Will. Meanwhile, Will continued to study hard. His roommate Rosti asked if he was going to the dungeon again the next day, but Will said he was going shopping with Coretto. Hearing that he was going out alone with a girl, Rosti suddenly felt threatened and flashed a mischievous smile. The next morning, Coretto dressed beautifully and arrived at the agreed spot. Even if today wasn't a date, she intended to make it one. After waiting a while, Will finally arrived. His bright smile instantly captured Coretto's heart. They exchanged greetings, and Will stared at Coretto for a moment, complimenting her outfit and hairstyle as very fitting and different from her usual self, which made him a bit nervous. Coretto, hearing this, became even more flustered. Just then, Rosti arrived out of breath, insisting on joining them. He claimed that shopping would be more fun and happier with more people. He walked up to Will, slid down his arm, and took his hand. Coretto was stunned when she saw this, and even more so when Rosti interlocked their fingers. "Do friends hold hands like this?" Rosti also turned back and made a face at her, clearly on purpose. Coretto was deeply affected. Throughout the day, every time Coretto tried to get close to Will, Rosti would suddenly appear. Coretto felt like a third wheel, unable to interrupt their interaction. She watched helplessly as her beloved Will seemed to be taken away by another man. When she finally got a moment alone with Will, Coretto immediately mentioned that he and his roommate seemed too close and asked if Rosti was actually a girl given his beauty. Will confidently stated Rosti was a boy as they bathed together daily, and Rosti was even more impressive. Coretto wanted to say more, but Rosti came back with 2 drinks. The reason for buying only 2 was that he intended to share one with Will. Hearing this, Coretto handed her drink over. Both had their grievances and eventually sent Will away. Coretto bluntly asked if Rosti had feelings for Will beyond friendship. Rosti pinned her against the wall, admitted it, and said he liked Will more than anyone else, and mentioned their intimate nightly baths, deliberately making it sound ambiguous as if they were involved in more. Meanwhile, as Will passed through a small alley, Liana suddenly called out to him. She led Will to a cafe and pushed open a door, revealing a room full of his acquaintances. The first to be seen were 2 jesters, Cheyenne and Julius, followed by Lindell, the champion of a recent competition. These 4 were also the top students at the academy. Liana clearly stated her reason for calling Will. Starting next semester, they would undertake a comprehensive internship, and she wanted these 5 to form a team to explore a dungeon. The other 3 were unaware of this, causing Cheyenne and Julius to immediately express their opposition, knowing their dislike for Will. Wondering why Liana, who was often clueless to the tension, had brought him here, Cheyenne broke down again, shouting, "Don't ignore me," as he attempted to grab Will. But in the next moment, they were pulled into Lindell's illusion. Lindell, appearing gentle, spoke sarcastically. "When did magicians become as barbaric as dwarves?" Cheyenne then let go, allowing Liana to continue. Her idea was simple. She wanted to team up with the finest magicians of the year, including the dazzling Will. Will had unique qualities that would be useful in the dungeon. Cheyenne and Julius immediately objected, still holding their prejudices against Will. Lindell mocked their petty pride and hostility, saying, "Your words are just the bluster of a defeated dog. How can you still look down on someone who has beaten you? I doubt your character." He then praised Will's performance. As the top student, Lindell showed respect for Liana's choice of the inept Will, leaving Cheyenne and Julius unable to refute. Liana's ambitions went beyond merely working in the tower. Staying in the academy was undoubtedly for those who were inferior and unsold. She carried the duty to prevent her family's decline and needed to become one of the highest 5 staves. With the ambition present in all attendees, forming a team of the strongest 5 promised great success. Liana asked those willing to place a coin in a cup. Lindell and 2 others agreed immediately, sharing the same goal. Will had no reason to refuse either. After leaving the cafe, Will met with Coretto and Rosti and informed them that he would join Liana for the comprehensive test. The comprehensive test was only 10 days away. The dungeon would open its restricted 7th to 10th levels, offering students a chance to earn over 1,000 credits in one go. However, the test was dangerous. Last year, 4 students were devoured by monsters. Teachers would patrol the dungeon continuously. Though not mentioned by name, Will knew Professor Edward was referring to him, advising against reckless bravery. They should not aspire to the highest ranks, but instead maintain a rational understanding of their own abilities. While Will teamed up with Liana's group, Coretto and Rosti were naturally with him. Rosti, from the Department of Magic Engineering, would stay back and had prepared sufficient magical tools for Will. Finally, amid great anticipation, the comprehensive internship began. Will and his team finally began their comprehensive internship. The leaders of the group charged ahead, with Will determined to make his mark. However, he immediately made a fool of himself by landing face first when Lindell used wind magic to help everyone jump down. A swarm of red ants appeared behind them. Will got ready to fight, wanting to protect the magicians, but Lindell stopped him, saying it wasn't necessary. Liana was already at the forefront, her body crackling with electricity, and she defeated the ants in close combat. Coming from a family of knights, Liana was a rare expert in melee combat magic among magicians. After the fight, Liana urged everyone to move forward quickly. Previously, when Teacher Wakuna had given Will extra lessons, he had asked what the most important magic in a dungeon was, revealing it to be detection magic. Due to the constant dangers in dungeons, where monsters could appear suddenly, this magic was crucial. Will, not knowing magic, felt out of place among the experts and was just dragging them down, with Lindell drawing attention by wiping out monsters with a wide-ranging wind magic and even complaining that Will was more of a hindrance than expected. Unable to even act as a shield, Will began to doubt Liana's judgment. Liana argued that Will just didn't have time to block for them and would prove his worth against stronger enemies, so being a burden now didn't matter. The magicians used their wands to absorb magic essence from the monsters, allowing the academy to verify how many credits of monsters the students had defeated. Unable to use a wand, Will could only pick up dropped items, earning him mockery from Lindell and Cheyenne, with only Coretto offering him comfort. Slapping his face to psych himself up, Will had anticipated this situation from the start and knew he'd have to find other ways to be useful. But as they progressed, he ended up not being helpful at all. A day into the internship, Liana finally agreed to take a break. Lindell used magic to create a fortress of flames, deterring approaching monsters. Meanwhile, Will distributed the food rations, including some for Lindell, who instructed him to just place it on the ground. As an elf, Lindell would not touch anything from those he did not acknowledge. Despite saying he didn't mind, Will showed a sad expression, respecting their customs and culture. Elves, like dwarves, are immigrants from another world, but they are treated differently because they belong to a magical race, have a strong sense of kinship, and often act superior. Their abilities surpass most magicians, and one of the current Supreme 5 staffs is an elven princess. During a break, Liana outlined their next plan. Their main target was the gatekeeper of the 10th floor, worth 110 credits. This gatekeeper was the only one and the greatest challenge of their internship. Liana wanted to take the shortest route to confront the gatekeeper in the best possible condition. Recalling he had only earned 5 credits today, Will was eager to earn more and not fall behind. Unbeknownst to them, the 10th floor was currently undergoing a disaster. 2 villains had not only killed the gatekeeper, but also a patrolling teacher. Julius and the others noticed something was amiss, as they encountered only dead monsters with gruesome deaths along the way. Their team should have been the first to arrive, so no other students could have reached there earlier. Will knelt to inspect and found no traces of magic on the monsters. They had been torn apart by brute force. The gatekeeper's room was just ahead by the cliff. After descending, the next sight was the dead body of the massive monster gatekeeper. Liana immediately had others perform detection magic to confirm it had just been killed recently. Detection magic is not all powerful, as some monsters can evade it. It was then Will's moment to shine. He was the first to sense a monster's presence above them, already preparing an attack. Will quickly warned everyone and blocked the incoming shockwave. While Lindell was still asking what was happening, the monster had moved behind him and flung him away. The other 4 reacted immediately, but the ground collapsed, and they all fell down. Will noticed Lindell seemed unconscious and rushed over to hold him amidst the falling debris. Meanwhile, those above felt intense ground vibrations. When Will, holding Lindell, finally hit the ground, he saw Lindell's arm was injured. They had fallen to the 11th floor, an area outside the academy's control. Cheyenne and Julius found themselves together, surrounded by looming flying monsters. Liana and Coretto, also together, recognized the area as the Demon's Intestine, a vast region extending to the 15th floor. The maze's structure and monsters' abilities here were entirely different from the previous levels. It was too dangerous for just 2 people. They needed to regroup quickly. Lindell, unconscious and injured, recalled his childhood. His tribe had criticized him for wasting time in an academy full of magicians and deemed him a disgrace. They said a useless arm should not be kept and cut off his left hand with a wand. Lindell awoke from the nightmare. Will ran to help bandage him, but was pushed away by Lindell, who insisted that as an elf, he did not want to be touched by the incompetent. He asked Will to bring him the supplies so he could treat himself. Their supplies on the 11th floor would last only a day, so Will wanted to prioritize regrouping with the others. However, Lindell thought they should wait for rescue. Will bluntly told him that without action, they would die, especially with such monsters on the 10th floor, making timely rescue unlikely. The teacher team has already launched a rescue operation due to a massive monster rampage in the dungeon. Many monsters have completely destroyed the headquarters, and 2 teachers' heads have been twisted off and nailed to the wall. The teachers have not yet reached the 9th floor and are unaware of the situation below. This is clearly a premeditated crisis. Teacher Edward rushed to inform Teacher Wakuna that the comprehensive internship had been terminated and they needed to rescue the students. Rosti, inside the tent, overheard their conversation and it was unclear what he planned to do. Meanwhile, Will and Lindell continued to move forward. Lindell kept using detection magic, but Will reminded him that this only consumed his magical power. They would be more efficient working together, with Will and his pet handling nearby scouting. Lindell only needed to guard against distant enemies and avoid large groups of monsters. Listening to Will's orderly instructions, Lindell gained a new appreciation for him. He wondered how Will could remain so calm under these circumstances. For Will, he had no choice but to earn his credits through the internship, having almost scouted the entire dungeon. As they spoke, enemies approached. Orcs appeared at 2 tunnels. Will assigned Lindell to handle the larger one while he took care of the 2 on the left. As the orc charged with its tongue lashing out, Lindell quickly used magic to trip it. However, Will had already neatly defeated one and then cut off the limbs of another. Lindell was so engrossed that he didn't notice another orc approaching from behind. Unable to chant a spell in time, he used an illusion to hide himself. Will immediately warned him against it, but it was too late. The orc charged into the flames, nearly splashing Lindell with its saliva. Finally, Lindell dropped his haughty attitude and screamed loudly. Will then threw a sword into the orc's eye and swiftly cut through its waist, standing before Lindell like a savior. Lindell felt utterly embarrassed. Will comforted him, praising him as a fine elf. But Lindell confessed that he was far from excellent. In fact, he was at the bottom of his class.